All right, so cross contour. So a shape is basically a, a form is basically a shape in 3 dimensions. So right here, I'm doing a kind of a bending cylinder, right? So we've done straight up and down cylinders. Now we're doing some more freeform type ones. So I could even give it more bends if I wanted, right? So I can flare it out and just sort of fill it with ellipses. So this time, instead of worrying about keeping the ellipses exactly the same, it's more about thinking about the way that the cylinder is bending, and see if you can sort of orient your ellipses to that. So it's a matter of practicing. So trying to communicate 3D forms, and with like a wireframe like they use in like 3D animation, 3D modeling. All right, so just try to just visualize what that form would be doing. So we're just trying to communicate the idea of a 3D object in space. And the only way that you can really show 3D objects on a 2D surface like this is either with contours or with shading, which is what we're going to get to right after this. All right, I'm going to get my 2H pencil. So that's kind of your bending cylinder. You can leave the construction lines as long as you make the primary lines dark enough. So I'm kind of going between a 2H and a 2B pencil. The next thing I want to do is a sphere. So we haven't really done spheres yet, because the difference between a circle and a sphere, when you're drawing it, is that you're implying that the sphere is 3-dimensional. And so to do that, you need to have some tools to communicate the idea of it being 3-dimensional. So again, either it's going to have to be some sort of contour, or it's going to have to be shading. So I'm going to act like this has got longitude and latitude lines, just like when you see a globe. So get a little bit closer together as I get towards the edge. And it'd be useful to imagine the ellipses, because each one of these lines, if you were to take a knife and cut through it, you'd cut it in half, just depending on the angle. This one here would be the other side of that one, but I actually want to have this one closer, and you don't want it to be too pointy at the end. It's getting a little too hairy. I kind of struggle with doing this one. So let's see if I can just imagine longitudinal lines, right? And then like this would be like the equator. And do another horizontal. Just keep imagining these ellipses inside of that circle to get that cross contour. And then I'll go back in with my darker pencil. Just trying to think about if I was going to do that wireframe on top of this ball, what would those curves look like? So even if it's not perfect, because it won't be, you're just striving for thinking that way and trying to convey that idea. And yeah, you're trying to make it perfect, but it won't happen. So you always have something to work towards. All right, so cross contour on a sphere-ish type thing. Bending cylinder. Get my 2H pencil again. Let's try putting them together. So that's going to be like a sphere type thing, some sort of cylinder type thing right here. I'll try to blend them together to make like a light bulb shape. So let's see. I'm not going to put as many lines on this one as I did in the sphere. So I'm going to this part here, this part here. Smooth that out a little bit. All right, so there'd be an ellipse here. We'll do another one here. I'm just trying to have the curviest part of the ellipse hit right on the edge right that. And I want to make sure that this stays curvy to communicate the idea that it's wrapping around the form. Also, try not to flatten it out too much here. So you want to have it curve here and ideally curve all the way through. All right. This is just a quick exercise to get you guys to start thinking about 3D form. All right, something like that. You could also do a similar type thing, which what I call, so that's like what I call like a light bulb shape, or if you wanted, you could do like more of a gourd shape, which would be a little bit more organic. It doesn't have to be quite so, geometric, I guess, but still the same idea where you have this kind of eggish type form and you have this more cylindrical form. And you try to figure out what the contours of that might look like. You're trying to imagine that the curves around the edge. All right. All right. So this is all going to get your head thinking about that, implying that depth. They're trying to communicate that depth so that when you go to shade, this is going to be the kind of shapes that you're going to use with your shading. When you're having the light divide the light from the dark, you're going to want to have your shadow follow along those contours. So that's why we're doing it. So while we're here, I want to also quickly go over some of these box forms. So remember, you can always subdivide any box by putting an X in it. And then you can go from that center point of that plane to the edges by doing a parallel line. The top and bottom, the sides, right? Like that. And I mention that now because for this, what I want you to do is I want you to start like chopping up and adding to some box forms. So if I'm going to find that point here and here, and I can get like a slope there, and I can add to it, right? So the way to add to it is you just kind of keep working kind of on the same perspective. And just thinking about how you might want to cut it up. So using the subdividing kind of helps me. So I want to cut a notch off of this here. So there's that parallel to this, that. I can pull that down. So you just kind of keep playing that consistency game where you're thinking about what's parallel and what's not, and just keep everything kind of cooperating. It's a little confusing. confusing because of this and that line are so similar in angles. So I'm just gonna pay attention to that. So parallel, parallel, parallel. Here, something like this. I'm just gonna arbitrarily make something up there. Wouldn't really be able to see that plane very well, so I'll put another angle in here. So just play around, adding and chopping off pieces of your box shapes. Just try to have fun with it and just mostly just keep thinking about what's parallel and just trying to maintain that consistency. That's really what this exercise is about, kind of thinking in 3 dimensions, thinking about which pieces of the object would be parallel with each other and then trying to maintain that relationship, that feeling of being parallel. Oops, I did something here, didn't I? Like that. So that's what the eraser's for. So yeah, that's why it's good to use a lighter pencil to do your construction because it can get pretty hairy. Trying to figure out all the different lines. You could darken it up. You can use your eraser too, but I don't mind seeing some of the construction lines. Mostly this is just about trying to figure out, or mostly about you trying to figure out 3D space, what's parallel more or less, and me seeing you try that. All right, so that's like a bending cylinder, a sphere or egg type thing, and like a light bulb or a gourd type thing. Some sort of box form where you chop off parts and you add on parts to it and just construct some sort of boxy thing, just focusing on chasing down those parallel lines. And then finally just start globbing some different things together and seeing what kind of weird shape you end up with. So you can just have some box forms with some gloopy forms with some sort of curving cylinder type forms. It's really up to you. It's just, again, I don't want you to stress too much about it. Just do your best to try to convey 3D objects, just like sort of doodle nonsense objects. So the main thing that's you're trying to do is just try to keep that communication of 3D form. So it's not really so much about whether or not it is a thing. It's better that it isn't a thing other than whatever this is. All right. So you can see there's not really much in the way of 3D. Sorry, not so much about like cross contours on boxes, because normally boxes, even in 3D modeling, there's like points and straight lines. When you have curves, that's when you tend to need a lot more contour lines to describe it. So here I got this weird thing here, trying to figure out which ellipses I would want to use to convey the idea of this being sort of a bending cylinder. Let's see here. It's a little confusing here, so let's see if I can figure it out. Just keep kind of try to have fun with it. Try not to get too wigged out about making it totally perfect. You know, I mean, try to make it perfect, but take your best shot at it. Try to keep it as clear as you can. And then move on. All right, so when I get this, I'm going to need to have sharp bend here. So this ellipse is going that way. This is that way. That means there's like a bend right there. So this is kind of spherical, but it could like flatten out there a little bit by putting a little bump there. can do some cross contours the other direction. All right. If I wanted to, I could put some on here, I guess, but I don't know that I really need to. It's more about for the more organic or curving forms, I think. All right. So bent cylinder, sphere, light bulb gourd, box forms globbed together and cut out of, and just sort of cross contour form, just a thing. Just try to make it clear. Don't try to necessarily have it be a thing that we would recognize. Just have it be a form that hopefully communicates its orientation in space. And you get that by, having consistency between the ellipses. So even here where there's like a bend in it, right? Where this ellipse is going that way, this is going that way. You can still sort of see that. All right, good luck.